China is going to be our biggest threat in years to come, Peter. Mark my words.
Get that relationship back to where it was. And
we're pushing hard because they've got more power.
The relationship between China and Australia is one of the biggest diplomatic challenges of our generation. A war of words and escalating trade tensions have dominated headlines recently.
I would say Australians have had a rude awakening about the realities of the relationship with China.
No other country is being targeted like we are at the moment.
But the latest data shows it's not all bad. And the question we need to be asking now is, where do we go from here? It's easy to see why the flare-up with Beijing rang alarm bells in Canberra. In a matter of months, trade relations plunged to a new low. Beijing began by cutting off beef imports from 4 of Australia's largest abattoirs. Those 4 abattoirs represent 1/3 of our $3.5 billion of beef exports to China. China then hit Australian barley with an unprecedented 80% tax, expected to last 5 years.
The relationship was just getting worse every day. There was a new announcement of a new problem in the Australia-China relationship every single day.
And it didn't stop there. China imposed a new customs check on rock lobster, introduced bans on timber, slapped tariffs on up to 200% of Australian wine, and scaled back imports of Australian copper concentrate. Then things went from bad to worse. News emerged that China formally blacklisted coal, one of our export cash cows. It contributes $70 billion to our total exports, and of that, China snaps up 1/5 of the total amount.
China has not been able to push as much economic pain as was expected in Australia.
That's because losses in some industries were propped up by a boom in the iron ore trade. Exports to China alone rose to 40 million tonnes in December, from 34 million in November.
So at the aggregate level, down by 2%, which is a very small hit, given that 2019 was a record high. So in other words, last year, it was the second highest level ever of total goods exports we'd shown to China.
Instead, China's heavy-handed approach seems to have backfired, at least for now. Despite decades of building influence in Australia, Beijing's friends here are now dwindling.
In the past 2 years, we've seen trust in China halve, with only 23% of Australians saying they trust China.
As long as China is targeting our farmers, targeting our universities, why would the Australian public have a positive vision of that sort of international actor?
And the solution is not simple or clear-cut. Mitigating risk is one proposal, meaning Australia finds other trade partners to make sure our export dollars don't dry up. But it's not a viable alternative in the near future.
There is always a scope for the government to encourage trade diversification to mitigate that shock. But the reality is as our lobster producers have found, we're a medium-sized open economy and we ultimately don't get to choose, on the whole, where the demand for our goods and services comes from.
Patching up the relationship is another alternative, although it won't be easy. But it doesn't necessarily mean bowing to all of China's demands.
China's formed the assessment that Australia is now aligned itself with the United States to attack China's interests. That's a fundamental problem for Beijing.
I suspect one of the reasons that the Australian government is kind of holding the line that it has taken on China is that they recognise any form of concession would be seen as a whole-scale kowtowing.
But politicians hoping for a breakthrough have so far been disappointed. Phone calls and meetings at a ministerial level are non-existent. So Australian officials are calling the current tactic strategic patience, essentially bracing for an ongoing standoff with China.
You don't address this assessment that China has formed, that we're aligning ourselves with the United States to attack China, with just a few flowery words and a few happy speeches.
They can do nothing, continue to behave in the way they're behaving at the moment, where they say they would like to meet with Chinese leaders, they would like to cooperate on shared challenges, but they don't want to back down on sovereignty, foreign interference, cyber attacks.
Realistically, Australia's prickly politics with China isn't even close to being over yet. In fact, it might be the new normal. The best case scenario now is to find some sort of middle ground.